Hello and welcome to our next class in the Introduction to Psychology, which is on learning. I'm going to be sharing a screen with you. It's the PowerPoint, which is also available on the class website. So here we go with sharing the screen. Now, as you can see, this is about learning. Now, one of the reasons we talk about learning is because much of human behavior is learned behavior. And it's different from what we call instinct or innate behavior. That's the behavior you are born knowing how to do it. So fish swim, birds migrate, babies smile. Nobody has to teach them how to do that. A learned behavior is a permanent change in behavior or knowledge that occurs because of experience. So we aren't born knowing how to speak. We're born ready to learn language, but we have to learn it. We are born knowing how to read. We are not born knowing how to cook. All of those are learned behaviors. Now, associative learning is the basic step in all forms of learning. It's the connection you make when things occur together. After lightning, there is thunder. If I cry, mother comes. If I open my hand, the ball drops. Those are associations for learning, but it also applies to more complex things. The letter A always makes the ah sound. The letter C makes the k sound. The letter T says t. So if we put them together, that association of sounds tells us it makes the word cat. We also learn to associate the word cat with the animal cat. So association, even though it is the most basic thing, if I touch something hot, it hurts, that's the basis of all learning. Yet it combines to all the things that lead to learning. So there's classical conditioning, operant conditioning, and observational learning. And all of these can be used in therapy. So I'm hoping that after you've watched this and you've read the chapter, we'll have a chance in the lecture on Monday to talk about how this contributes to things we can try when we're doing counseling with couples or families. Now, classical conditioning is when we train a behavior to occur in response to an event or what we call a stimulus. And Pavlov is the scientist who discovered this, and it was really kind of funny because he was actually studying digestion, and he had put a tube into the dog's throat here so he could see when they began to salivate, because he was trying to figure out where did the food start to break down. So he would come in his lab coat, he would go and get the food and put in front of the food. Well, after a couple of weeks of doing this, he realized there was something going wrong, because the salivation was starting as soon as the dog saw him. So it was starting long before the meat was put in front of them. And he became the signal to the dogs that we're about to get fed. And so we call that signal, that thing that's happening in the world, the stimulus. So anything we can see, feel, hear, touch, taste, those are all what we call natural stimuli. And one of the things he started to think about is, well, can I get the dogs to kind of salivate on command to things that aren't food? Food is the unconditioned stimulus. An unconditioned stimulus is the natural things we react to. Food, a loud noise, a scary animal. And then we have an unconditioned response, which is the natural response we have to that. So if food is a natural stimulus, salivation is a natural response. If a loud noise is a natural stimulus, that startle reaction is an unconditioned response. If you see a scary animal, feeling fear or running away, that unconditioned response is what happens naturally. What he wanted to do is know if he could take a neutral stimulus, something that doesn't naturally cause the reaction, and get it to cause that reaction. So a pink triangle should not cause a startle reaction. And he wanted to see, but if I combine that, can I get that reaction? So what Pavlov did is he rang a bell every time he fed the dogs. That bell was the neutral stimulus. It's got nothing to do with food. Every time he fed the dogs, they would salivate. So after pairing the food and the bell many, many times, the dogs started to salivate as soon as they heard the bell. They were conditioned to have that reaction. So the bell, which is completely neutral, becomes a conditioned stimulus. And salivating to the bell becomes a conditioned response. Because if I'm ringing the bell and my dog's in, there's no food. You shouldn't be having this reaction. So that's why we called it a conditioned stimulus and a conditioned response. So when we're trying to do classical conditioning, there's stages. First, we pair food and salivation. Then we pair food and bell, and they start to salivate. And eventually, the bell and the salivation, you just need the bell to get it. And that's the process of acquisition. And it can take a while to develop that. But as parents, we do it all the time. We start to recognize the baby's face when they're about to go poop, and we put them on the toilet. And after a while, the baby waits to poop till they're on the toilet. So we don't have piles of poop all over our house, which is a good thing. But that takes a while for the child to learn that connection between the physical sensations and going to the bathroom and the toilet. Now, that becomes a behavior that gets maintained. But when there's no real new benefit to doing it, there's also a phase called extinction. And that's that period where we keep giving the conditioned stimulus. We keep ringing that bell. And eventually the dog figures out, oh, the bell rings, but there's no food. So it stops. But if we wait a while and we ring the bell again, the dog starts salivating again because his brain still remembers that connection, and he's hoping you will bring food again. But again, if you don't bring food, it will wear out. So, and then the maintenance is if we want to keep that connection, every so often we pair the bell and the food, and so the response keeps happening. And that's a way of keeping it going and maintaining it. And that may happen when you're training an animal to do something. You want the kitten to always use the kitty litter tray. You want, well, that's not a good example. You want the animal to keep coming when you call, here boy. So every so often you give him a treat when you call here boy. So he comes because he's made the connection between the sound of here boy and getting a treat. Now, the other thing that we look at is what we call generalization. So with the dogs, if they got used to hearing a bell and then I start to use a gong, well, a gong and a bell are kind of the same. So maybe the dog will salivate to that too. Generalization is the baby is always fed from a blue bottle. She reaches for the blue bottle when she's hungry, but then she sees a green bottle and she reaches for it because she thinks it will have the food. But discrimination is learning to tell the difference between similar stimuli and only reacting to the correct one. So when she gets the green bottle, she realizes, oh, there's nothing in it. So from now on, if there's a blue and a green bottle, she'll only reach for the blue bottle. And that's one of the ways you can, when animals do tricks in a circus or something, and the horse, say, is it the red or the green one? That's the right answer. And they'll tap on the red one. That's because they've learned that only tapping on the red one will get them a treat. A higher order conditioning is when you react to something that's not even connected. You weren't trying to do it. So if one of the people in Pavlov's labs had always worn a red hat, the dogs would start to react to red hats, even though they never deliberately paired it. So when mom always wears a red hat when she's feeding the baby, now whenever the baby sees a red hat, she starts to fuss for a bottle. And this is one of the ways we are able to train animals, because we can keep sort of making it react to higher order things. So what some of the real examples of classical order conditioning? If your alarm clock goes off every morning at 6 a.m., which mine does, on the day I don't have to go to work, I wake up at 6 a.m., even if the alarm doesn't go off, because I've classically conditioned myself to do that. Another one was in Recife. It's a great place to go surfing, but it's really, really dangerous because there are so many sharks there. And what happens is there's a fish cleaning factory, and it takes its boat out and it dumps all the fish guts and the fish garbage. Now the sharks would show up and get the fish. But now anytime they hear the sound of a motorboat, sharks start to congregate, expecting there's going to be lots of dead fish bits. So it's a little bit hard because the boat still does dump fish guts. So the sharks keep getting, yep, this still works. So every time they hear a boat that has nothing to do with the fish guts, they're there. Another one, this happens in real life. If your husband comes home from work every day at 6 o'clock, even on the day he's late, you may start to feel happy around 6 o'clock because your brain has associated that with happiness. Now, usually we talked about acquisition, and it takes several tries to make you learn that connection. There is a thing though called one trial conditioning, and it's rare, and it almost always happens when the thing could really seriously harm you. So one of the ones is it happens with food. If you eat a new food and get sick that day, you will feel sick whenever you see that food, even if it was because of the flu, not the food that you got sick. And I have an example from my life about that. I am allergic to penicillin. When I was a child, I was very ill, and they gave me grape flavored penicillin. And that's how we found out I was allergic to penicillin. And I became very, very ill. When I got out of the hospital, I couldn't drink grape juice. The smell of grape juice made me want to throw up. There was a kind of bubble gum that was very popular when I was about 8, and it was called Hubba Bubba, and it smelled like grapes. And if I smelled it, I wanted to throw up. I'm not allergic to grapes. I'm allergic to penicillin, but my body had such a strong reaction, and what it remembers is the grape flavor. So I have such a strong reaction to it, it still makes me feel sick. Now, we can use conditioning in strange ways. So I'm going to tell you the story of little Albert and the scary rabbit. And this is an example of classical conditioning. John Watson was a behaviorist, and he was saying that we do not need to try to explain problems by looking at the factors that psychoanalysis did. He said, what happens in our life causes us to have problems. But little Albert had a rabbit that he was playing with. And every time little Albert went to touch the rabbit, Watson made a loud, scary noise. I think it was he was hammering on something. And every time little Albert heard the noise, which was the unconditioned stimulus, he got scared and jumped. But after a while, he started to pair the jumping and the scared with the rabbit. And when they brought the rabbit back to him, every time he saw the rabbit, he started to cry. Well, my conclusion about this is that Watson was a mean man. But it also shows us we can teach people to be afraid of something that's really not dangerous if it's paired with things that are dangerous. And so sometimes what I'll see is when I see people who have post-traumatic stress disorder after a car accident, if they were hit by a red car, every time they see a red car, they get scared. They have a panic attack. So that classical conditioning of fear to the red car is something we have to then work on helping them overcome. We have to do the extinction phase. Now, operant conditioning is teaching patterns or by increasing or decreasing the frequency of the behavior by using reinforcers or punishment. And what that means is, if I want you to stop a behavior, I can punish it every time that behavior happens. If I want you to increase a behavior, I can reinforce you every time you do the new behavior. We can also, remember the rat video I showed you with the little rats playing basketball? They didn't learn how to play basketball just like that. The first thing she did was teach them to touch the basketball by covering it with peanut butter. Once they were touching it, she put the peanut butter on her fingers and would start to reinforce them every time they took the basketball in their little hands. Then she would put her finger above the little fence, and every time they put their paws on it, she would give them peanut butter. Then she'd move her hand back farther till they jumped over the fence to come get the peanut butter. So what she did by using peanut butter on her finger, she shaped the behavior until now they have to get the ball, jump over the fence, and put it in the hoop, and then she gives them the peanut butter. And operant conditioning is something we do every day, and it is one of the things we often use when we're doing marriage therapy. Because one of the things we'll say is every time your husband or wife does something nice for you, smile at them and thank them. Because then they start going, oh, I want to get that smile and that thank you. Or I want to get them saying I love you. Or every time your wife does something nice for you, you compliment her. Or you do something nice back. And then you start doing more and more nice things for each other because you're reinforced for doing nice things. But it's a really important one. Now, when we talk about punishment reinforcement, A lot of people think punishment is bad. Well, punishment where you're just hurting the person and not teaching them anything new is bad. But there are lots of punishments where you're not hurting the person. Punishment is anything we do to decrease the frequency of a behavior, make it happen less often. So positive punishment, positive doesn't mean good or bad in this situation. Positive punishment means I'm doing something to the person as a punishment. A negative punishment is I'm taking something away. So positive means you do it, negative means you take it away. So one of the things that happens is what we call the law of effect. People or children or animals start to realize, if I do this, it causes this bad thing. So I shouldn't do that. And some examples of positive punishment. The teacher talks in class, so the child talks in class, so the teacher says, makes them write, I will listen in class 50 times. A positive punishment, the husband comes home late from work, the wife gives him a cold dinner. The kitchen, the teenager leaves the kitchen a mess, the parents make her clean the kitchen, the bathroom, and do the laundry. So positive punishment teaches a lesson, but it shouldn't be mean or to hurt the person, because sometimes if it's that kind of positive punishment, the other person gets angry. So if the husband comes home late from work and the wife yells and screams at him, it's a positive punishment, but it's a punishment that's not going to work. The wife burns dinner and the husband calls her names. That's a punishment, but it's not going to help her not burn dinner. The teenagers leave a mess and the parents hit her in the face. Well, the teenager is now going to be angry at the parents, may not want to listen to them, and it hasn't taught her to clean the kitchen up. Negative punishment are things where we take something away. The teenager comes home late, we take away their freedom and they're grounded. You can't go out tonight. The child steals a toy, so we take his favorite toy away from him. A child misbehaves in class and the teacher says, you have to stay in for recess. They took away the pleasure of recess. The husband comes home drinking and the wife doesn't talk to him. She takes away her interaction. So negative punishment, we take something away. That can be helpful because we're stopping them from hitting, we're stopping them from talking in class, but they don't teach a positive behavior. So we're left with kind of this empty space where another negative behavior could come in. So we want to increase frequency of positive behaviors at the same time we're decreasing the negatives. So some of those things that we do, reinforcement is anything to increase those behaviors we want the person to do. So positive reinforcement, you give them something they want in reaction to the behavior. Negative reinforcement, you remove something unpleasant to increase the behavior. And again, there's that law of effect. If I do this and this happens, I realize that's the effect of this, and I want to get it, so now I'll do it more often. So examples of positive reinforcement. The child does their homework, so you play ball with them when they're done. Your husband brings you tea, so you give him a hug. Your wife irons your shirt, so you compliment her and say, I love you. The teenager cleans his room, so you let him watch TV. The student raises their hand rather than talking in class, so you praise him. Now, every time the child goes to bed without fussing, they get a sticker. Once they have 5 stickers, they can have a treat like staying up later. And that's because we want to start to get it so you don't need reinforcement every single time. And in daily life, we want to help couples learn to reinforce each other so they keep treating each other well and their marriage works. Negative reinforcement's a lot harder because it's about taking away something unpleasant in order to increase the behavior. So these ones are not nearly as common, but it's things like the car stops beeping when you put your seatbelt in. That beep, beep, beep is unpleasant. So if I put the seatbelt in, it stops. So it means I'm more likely to keep putting my seatbelt on. When you finally clean your room, your mother stops nagging. I don't want my mom to nag, so I will clean my room. So, but that's the kind of things. You know, the drip, drip, drip of the tap is really driving you crazy, so you will fix it. And because that made you feel better, you may fix other things around the house. When we're working on negative behaviors, sometimes one of the things we do is we just ignore the behavior, like temper tantrums. You don't necessarily need to punish temper tantrums to make them decrease. You just ignore them so the child realizes this isn't going to work. There's that law of effect again. If I give in to the temper tantrum, if I pay attention to them because of the temper tantrum, they're going to keep doing it because it worked. So ignoring some negative behaviors is very useful. Ignoring negative behaviors when they're hitting or hurting is you can't. Whenever possible, when we're using reinforcement and punishment, try to use what we call natural consequences, things that will happen to them that they'll start to realize. So if your child won't wear their winter coat, which is very important in Canada, let them go out and be cold. Very quickly, they'll be back inside your house, putting their coat on. I just talked to a dad the other day, and he was talking about when his daughter was young, she was screaming and yelling because she wanted to go swimming in her little pool. And dad had explained to her, it's December. It's cold outside. There is snow. It's too cold. She wanted it. So he ended up filling up her little pool, let her put her bathing suit on. She ran outside and realized this is way too cold. She came running back in, and temper tantrum stopped, and she never temper tantrum to have the pool out in the winter again. If your husband or child is always late for supper, you might not keep their dinner warm, and they'd start to realize I need to come home on time to eat. One of the things that I sometimes hear, people will say reinforcement is bribery. No, bribery is you usually say, if you do this, I will give this to you. And a lot of times you end up trying to give it to the child beforehand. Here, do this. I'll give you this. Reinforcement is they've already done the behavior. And you say, great, it's done. Here's your treat. Reinforcement is natural. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't go to work if I didn't get paid. Getting paid reinforces my going to work. And then that money, which is a secondary reinforcer, because money really doesn't have any value, that lets me buy all the things that I work for. Now, many behaviors we need to remember have natural reinforcers as well. And so a lot of people worry that, well, if they're used to getting reinforced, they won't do it if they're not being reinforced. But one of the things we find, like if you reinforce somebody for doing their homework, they often end up being proud of good students, so they no longer need that ongoing reinforcement. When you praise and compliment your child for cleaning up their room, or you let them have stickers when they clean up their room, living in a clean room is nice, so they start to keep it clean even without the stickers. I can tell you that one works for my son because he's a grown-up now. His house is clean. So reinforcing bad behavior is something we need to be really careful about. If a child is fussing in a store, giving them that treat to be good means they have figured out fussing gives me a treat. So they're going to do it when they want to treat. A lot of times we think it'll help them calm down, but what we are really doing is reinforcing that bad behavior. Now, when we look at reinforcers, there's primary, and those are the ones that satisfy our natural urges. Food or candy or sleep or being hugged or being touched, getting affection, getting that social connection. All of those satisfy us without any training or teaching. We know they will. But secondary reinforcers, they have no real value, but because it's linked to a primary reinforcer, we start to value it. So if you offer a little kid money, like a 2-year-old money, they'll play with it, but they don't think money has any value because they don't know what to do with it. Money, though, for older people is very reinforcing. We can buy lots of things, we can buy whatever we want. Praise from people you really don't know doesn't do anything. But praise from people we care about or who are friends, that has value because it proves our friends have affection for us or care about us. Stickers, a lot of times, are very reinforcing because you can trade them in at the end of the week for something else. But stickers also start to be cute, and kids want to trade them, and kids want to show them off. So it becomes popular as a reinforcer, not just because you're getting something, but because it helps you connect with your friends. And then we have tokens. So when we're using a behavior program with somebody with autism or developmental delays, or even in a young offender facility, every time they follow the rules, they get a token. And those can be traded for getting a snack at the snack bar. One of the things that's really important is punishment should never take away those tokens or those secondary reinforcers. So punishment, you could say, I am taking away your TV time tonight, but you don't take it from the tokens, because otherwise, why would I ever bother? Even if I do something good, nothing good comes of it. So we need to not make sure that if they've done something good, that even if they misbehave, we don't take away the treat. So if we tell a child or our wife, we are going to go to a movie this weekend, we are going to go to visit our friend and play there, and then they misbehave the next day, and you can't take that away, because that's what they got for doing something well. Now, one of the things we do is we can vary how often we give reinforcement, because you don't want to give it to them all the time. So we're trying to spread it out so they learn to do it. So an interval one is where you give the reinforcement every at a fixed amount of time, like every 15 minutes they're working, they get the treat. Now, one of the things that can be difficult is sometimes kids will wait till that last couple of minutes in the 15 minutes and then they do it, because they figured it out that every 15 minutes. But it is how paydays work. Every 2 weeks, you get your paycheck. Every week, you get your paycheck. At the end of every day, however it works, but you get your pay at the same time all the time. And that's a fixed interval reinforcement. The variable one means it's not always the same length of time before the reinforcement. And in a way, that's how parties work. You have a group of friends, and they say, let's have a party this Friday night. You get together, you have fun. It was very reinforcing, so you continue to interact with those friends. But the next party might not be for 2 weeks, and the party after that might be 4 days away. But the fact that your group keeps doing these fun things, you continue to hang out with that group and want to be friends with them. A ratio reinforcement occurs after a certain number of responses. So if your child does 5 pieces of math problems and you give them a sticker, it's also a piece where it works. Every time you make something, and pick in Canada, for me, when I was a teenager, I picked fruit, and every basket of fruit that I brought up to the table, I would get paid. They had this card, and they would make little holes in it, and at the end of the day, they would count up, and they would say, you filled 42 baskets of fruit, you get $42 today. You filled 14 baskets, you get 14 today. So that's a fixed ratio. A variable ratio, and that's how slot machines work, and it keeps people going and going because they never know when they're going to get reinforced, is sometimes you get paid every 5 baskets. Sometimes they pay you for the 10th basket. It's not a very good way for paying people, because you never know how much you're going to get, and most people wouldn't put up with that. But it works really well for slot machines. In families where the husband or the father is abusive, every so often he's really nice. And so they keep hanging in, waiting for that really nice day to come back. So it's one of the ways that if we really want somebody to stay involved, that's the way to do it. Shaping is when we reinforce behaviors that get closer and closer to what it is that we want them to do. So with children, we might praise them the first time they try to make the bed, show them how to do it better, praise them when they do it a little bit better, show them again how to correct it, and keep praising them until they're actually doing it completely right. The last kind of learning I actually did some research on, and we watch other people do something so we know how to do it. When you watch your mother cook, you learn how to do that cooking yourself. When you watch them stirring the shima, you realize, oh, that's how often I have to do it. With social skills, nobody goes around and tells you how to ask a woman on a date. Nobody specifically teaches you how close or how far apart you should stand when you're shaking hands. We learn that by watching, how do other people do it? How do my friends do it? So there's a lot of those social skills. We learn, oh, we're supposed to stand in a line, because the first time we go to the playground and we run to the front of the line to get on the slide and there's children in the line, they push us to the back. And then we start to see the lineup. We know we have to line up. It's very difficult for people with autism to learn by observation. And observational learning is kind of interesting, because you may learn it and not use it for a really long time. So, the young woman who's been watching her mother cook, Now she wants to make dinner for her family. It's the first time she's done it, but she's learned by watching her mother for many, many years. And you can learn by observation, by watching someone do it, but it also counts if somebody explains how to do it, or you can watch it happen in a video or a movie and learn how to do it. So those are the different kinds of learning. I hope I haven't talked too fast. I would really like you to read chapter 6 in the book. I hope you've watched this video. You can look over the PowerPoint. There's more details, but I'm hoping that on Monday when we meet at 3 o'clock, we will be able to talk about these details and go more into depth about how you can use these strategies in therapy, how you can help people learn new behaviors and new ways to act, because learning is the basis of it all. I'm going to stop the recording now, and it will be uploaded in just a few minutes. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you think about learning.